Hello and welcome to Yasodhara Ashram podcast. In this series, we will be offering an insight into the practice of satsang, where the community comes together every night and shares insights of wisdom and chants for the prayer list. In this episode, Swami RadhaTarananda speaks about selfless service, sharing stories of traveling the world and finding ways to give back.
I spent over an hour this morning looking through the Radha book, trying to find a quote, a little part of a writing from Swami Radha, and I never found it, but I found it quite inspiring to try to find the quotes. And what I was looking for was where she has spoken about working in the leper colony in India, and I think you've heard that she went and she chanted at the leper colony, and a discussion that she had with Gurudev, and she had heard a story of I think it was a Catholic priest. That's what I wanted to get kind of clear and correct, according to her words, who had done a lot of selfless service, but the person had died in that, and when she spoke with Gurudev about it, he said, it's important to, and I'm really paraphrasing, it's important to know that your selfless service includes self-reflection and reflection on yourself. If you think somehow that it's not about being a do-gooder for another person. That's volunteer work, but that's not what selfless service is. So there's protection in that strong reflection of what selfless service is about. That's the protection. But I couldn't find it, so I thought, well then, I've spent a fair amount of time and I've run out of time in this day, so I'm going to have to speak from my own experience with it. But I'll say a bit more about quite a potent story that I've had in regard to selfless service. But I'll ask you to, as we're doing it, as we're chanting tonight, to just lightly think if it speaks to you of where you have been giving in your life and you gave from your heart and it impacted your life. So just see where that leads you to. And the other thing that I was thinking about, it kind of in relationship to that, is that Swami Radha has said with something, for example, a person can attain higher consciousness through a chanting of a mantra, but if you notice opera singers or singers of great stature practice all day long, but they don't attain enlightenment. So the intention and the offering is different. And so we're doing something different here, and I find it helpful to kind of get underneath that of what is it that I'm actually doing. A couple of more things that Swami Radha said, and then a little bit more of my own experience. But she said that the ashram, we learn to be selfless in the ashram, and that it's important to realize that the ashram exists for us. Like it's our opportunity for growth. And sometimes it can be like, I'm working so hard, I'm doing this for the ashram. But to really recognize that underneath it all, it's about our own growth and our own evolution. And that for me, it's like whatever presents itself in the day is just so rich for the lessons that and the experiences that I need to keep growing and evolving. And sometimes really highly pleasant, and other times the exact opposite. It's like it's whatever it's going to be. But I oftentimes just open to the day and start the day with, let it lead me, and it does. It leads me to what I need to know. this ashram is like a training ground to learn how to be selfless. And I did listen to Swami Radha quite a lot because she'd been through 2 world wars, and she had so much wisdom and so much experience. And I'd look at her and go, how did you manage to get through that? And one thing that she said is, it's so important in all of this to learn to give back to life. Like that's what we're here for, is to learn to give back. And that can be a challenge and also very rewarding. What I found is that learning to be selfless doesn't mean it's no reward and it's glum and it's hard work. It means letting go of the expectation of reward, of I'm doing this, therefore to get that. And the ashram really helps, I find, me to learn that lesson. Because when my expectations are there, and sometimes hidden, I don't know, until something happens, and then it's like, oh, I had expectations it was going to go this way, and it's going that way. So my mind can really get in the way. The other thing that I wanted to speak about tonight is how well set up the ashram is. I'm talking a lot about the ashram, but it's because I really value what it has to offer. It offers us that opportunity to give back, and it's a really great training ground, and it centers around that. And I remember when I went through it was both a difficult period and a transitional period for me in my spiritual development. I'd come up kind of against myself and didn't know what to do. And Swami Radhananda was loving and direct with me, and she was challenging me. She said, "What are you going to do?" And I came up, and she'd say, "Give me a plan." And so I'd give her a plan, and she'd look at it, and she goes, "This isn't a plan. Like, this is the same thing that you always do." So she challenged me to go deeper and think deeper. And at one point, she said, "Just travel the world." And I went, "Okay." And it's like something in me lit up. I had traveled once before, and I had changed, but I didn't consciously set about changing. I changed. But here I needed to do something to change. And so I decided, in conjunction with her, that I would go back to India, where I'd been before, and where a lot of change had happened then. And with her encouragement was to find ways to give back, like don't just go as a tourist, and offer selfless service. And so I'd been well practiced in it, and got there and was going to work for an organization that on the day that I got there, they met with the CEO, and the whole project had fallen apart. And I had already arrived and had my visas and everything. So then I had to figure it out. And so I went from place to place with that idea of offering selfless service. And what I found out, one thing, is that hardly any places in the world are set up the way that to actually take a person in, to give them that opportunity. People need help, but it's not organized. So we really do have something amazing happening here. But in that, there's a story that I end up like telling stories, but it was quite close to the end of my time, and I was in a Dharamsala, and I got there, and Swami RadhaTarananda, who's no longer alive, said to me, "Go to Gochu Sum, they need selfless service." And so I found out where that was. It's a small little village. Went there, and so knocked on the door, and I said, "So do you need any help? I do accounting, and I teach yoga." And they went, "Well, actually, like, could you come back tomorrow and we'll have you look at our books? We're going to get audited. Could you do a forensic audit?" And I said, "Sure." And so I came back at the appointed time, and they offered tea and cookies. And Tibetan people are really friendly and kind of huggy-wuggy people. Like, they have that way about them. So I looked through their books, and they were actually in good shape, which is can be quite amazing for little not-for-profits, because usually that's not a strong point, but the person that was showing them to me is like, yeah, you know, this is fine. You'll be able to show your paper trail and it'll work. And then, you know, that was it. Like, it only took like less than an hour. And I was just about to go, and a monk ran up the stairs and he says, someone that was supposed to be teaching English to this Tibetan nun, she left, so we don't have anybody. Can you teach English, which I'd never done before? And I said, sure. And he said, so if you meet with her at 6 o'clock every night and just walk around. So I made the commitment to do it. It was a treat from beginning to end. So the first night she talks to me, and her English is really broken, and I have a lot of patience and kind of can listen. And what she told me was the person before her that she had spoken to, because different people come along and volunteer, she spoke for about an hour to him. And at the end of it, he said, very good, I didn't understand a word you said. So it was the accent, but she had gotten better by the time. I could barely understand. It was very broken English. But we did that. We walked around her village, and she would speak English, and you know, she brought me into the temples and the prayer wheels, and told me her life story, like being her parent. She was a nomadic life. And everybody in Tibet, the families offer one of their children to a monastery or to a nunnery. That's pretty standard practice. So it's not unusual. So she wanted to become a nun, and her brother didn't want to become a monk. So she went in. And so she was in the nunnery for a couple of years, and there was about only 7 of them in this small little nunnery. They walked around a stupa with placards saying, long live the Dalai Lama, and they got arrested. So that was the story. So her story was landing in prison as a nun. And that part of the story is really was quite something. But what she said is, in our tradition, we heal by telling our stories. So the Dalai Lama is telling us to tell our story. So she was telling her story, and it's, you know, not easy to hear being in prison and what that was like for her. And she got off the lightest because she was the youngest. So the one that was the oldest was seen as being the troublemaker in the group, and so the punishment was more severe. So I did this. I walked around with her, and she was funny. She said, I get up at 4 in the morning. I studied till 11 o'clock every night. And I said, you do? And you don't get tired? She said, oh yeah, everybody, we get tired in learning Tibetan. We all sleep through Tibetan class. But the rest of it, she was so motivated to be educated because she hadn't been educated. And her desire was to then go into back. She couldn't go back to Tibet, but to teach other children how to speak, to educate, help educate, be a teacher. So she had big plans, and she was extremely motivated. And then so it came to the night before that I was going to leave the next day. We were saying goodbye, and she asked me if I would take her to an internet cafe that the person before had left an email address and had probably emailed her and had gotten her set up with an email address, but she didn't know what to do. So I took her into the internet cafe and got her online, and there was an email from the previous person, and that person had sent her a picture of Tara, a Tibetan tanka. And I looked at, and she was feeling badly because she couldn't respond. She said she wants to write to me, but I can't. I don't know how to write English. But the person had sent the image, and I said, you know Tara. I mean, now I think in retrospect, of course you know Tara. She's from the Tibetan tradition. And she said, yes, I know Tara. She said, Tara, at one point, the prison guards they beat me so badly. I was black and blue and on the floor, and I couldn't get up. And I prayed to Tara. And I woke up the next morning, I was in my bed. I had no marks and I was full of energy. And it was like, oh my goodness, like, this is quite the story. Like, I had been praying to Tara myself, but to hear that experience was quite amazing to me. And it's like, to me, that's kind of the reward of selfless service, of being privileged enough to hear people's experience. I mean, there's many, many ways of having selfless service, but that's what I mean when it's out of the blue that these gifts come, because it strengthened my faith in Tara as well. And so we'll finish with grace. And so if you will just come into a quiet position for yourself, a stilling of your mind and heart, and noticing what comes to your mind and to your heart today when you think of grace. Namaste.
Thank you for listening. Yasodhara Ashram acknowledges the Tanaha and Sinayaks First Peoples on whose unceded territory we are caretakers and guests. You can find out more about the ashram at yasodhara.org, where you can join the mailing list, and you can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. This has been Satsang Talks, and Hari Om Tat Sat.